Roy. Professor Roy is the head in Department of Geography, Cooch Behar, Panchanan Barmar University. He has received his PhD in Geography from Shantiniketan, and he is the chief editor of GeoAnalyst. He is also the president of Geographical Society of West Bengal and member of many professional bodies. He has, to his credit, many articles published in national and international journals. His field of specialization are human geography, particularly transport, development, and tourism. He has been contributing to many UGC and ICSR funded projects and illuminating the academia. Professor Sarfaraz Alam, he is not with us today because he is down with COVID. Coming to Dr. Andy Higginbottom, he is an associate professor at Kingston University, London, where he teaches on international political economy, slavery and emancipation and crimes of the powerful. And he takes a great interest in movements of extravagantism and neocolonialism and oppression. His current research project is an exploration of the effects of Marini's concept of labor, super exploitation on Marx theories of surplus value, profit, and rent. We also have with us Dr. Aprajita Dey. She's also a panelist, and she is faculty in Department of Geography, Delhi School of Economics, Delhi University. Her research largely falls within the scope of urban and media studies. Papers taught by her also focuses on similar themes and is closely interlinked to her research interest. Over the past decade, she has been working persistently on the themes of constructions of spaces in everyday lives, having conducted research and published on socio-spatial construction of Hindu-Muslim identities in the backdrop of communal violence. She has also keen interest in examining the notions and practices of urbanism in South Asia vis-a-vis understanding of modernity, particularly within the current post-colonial and neo-colonial discourses. Her interest in media stems from her earlier research on geographical imaginations, particularly how it is formed and informed by popular imaginations, and has been working on the new media to understand notions of space, border, and everyday conflict cultural practices. Her current research looks into how space and time cross-cuts to produce places in new media, particularly the post-colonial knowing of the colonial Kolkata or Calcutta. We also have with us another panelist, Dr. Veer Mayank, and Dr. Veer Mayank is an assistant professor in Department of Law, Sikkim University. He has done his MPhil in International Law from JNU and LLB, LLM from Purvanchal University, Jaunpur. His areas of specialization includes international trade and business law, international economic law, etc. He has many publications to his credit in many national and international journals. With this introduction, now I would like Professor Vaidya, sir, to please continue and chair the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Now we will begin a session, and we have, at least as you suggested, we have 3 panelists, and now time is sufficient. Instead of 15, we can have a 20 minutes to each panelist. So I request Andy to deliver a lecture for 20 minutes. So Dr. Andy Higginbottom, please, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both for the invitation and for the introduction. Can you see my screen, everybody? Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to talk about a coal mining project in the north of Colombia. I will cover the following points, obviously, very quickly. So I'll explain where I'm coming from. And I want to talk quite a lot about the political economy of the mine, look at its financial data, and some comments about how to conceptualize this before coming to an end. So the question of solidarity is a sort of a taken, to be honest with you. I'm involved in the Colombia Solidarity campaign here in the UK. And I'm actually going to focus a little bit more on the, if you like, the political economy of the structures which we are opposing. The standard development paradigm is well known. It's that the foreign direct investment is basically an index of development. This paradigm was first operationalized by the World Bank in 1949. Its first country report was actually on Colombia, and the World Bank advocated that Colombia go through a process of accelerated development, which combined foreign direct investment with an export orientation, especially then in agriculture. This concept of accelerated development has been applied quite broadly by the World Bank as the sort of standard orthodox approach. If, for example, it's been applied to Africa through the Berg report, which caused a lot of debate in the 1980s and is generally seen as the beginning of the neoliberal period in Africa. I subscribe to a train of thought which in the Latin American context is known as the dependency paradigm. I won't go into all of the literature. This is seen as something from the 1970s, which I actually want to bring up to date. And the basic paradigm is that the structures of the world economy were fundamentally shaped by colonialism, and to this day have never really escaped from that fundamental shaping. So the metropole colony type polarization involved transfers of wealth. Drain theory in India would be exactly a similar sort of strand point. And these transfers of wealth have changed in their form, but not so much in their content in the post-colonial period. The transfers of wealth affect not only the rich, making richer the already rich countries and making poorer the already poor countries, but they shape internal relations within those countries as well. I'm particularly interested in a development within Latin America of what's known as the Marxist wing of dependency theory, which responds to critics of the paradigm, which says you're only looking at external and circulatory type factors. And Rumaru Marini, who is a Brazilian, developed a notion of labor super exploitation as the basis of the wealth transfer. And I work with his thought, basically. And I would distinguish this approach from some other critical approaches in the literature, some of which are well known, such as that by David Harvey, and some which are just emerging and less well known. Taking the paradigm of dependency, I think that it can be developed further using Marx's theory of rent as a surplus profit. I welcome the contribution from Africa, Kwame Nkrumah, of the concept of neocolonialism, which has also been brought up to date by a very recent contribution by David White, where he calls the neocolonial relation a criminogenic pact, which tends to lead to ecocide. In other words, modern extractivism is completely bound up with a neocolonial relation. And then the third development, which is very much of the current generation, is to shift the focus of the idea of super exploitation from labor to also include nature. So these are the sort of the strands of thought that I'm working with. The case in academic terms that we're looking at is the Cerrejón mine. It's the biggest open cast coal mine, certainly in the Atlantic basin, certainly in Latin America. I've read some accounts say it's the biggest in the world, but perhaps I'm not entirely sure that's true, and perhaps you may be able to inform me on that in terms of mining in India. But it's very big. I mean, you can see it on Google satellite and so on. There's two sort of structures to the mine, but it's really one big complex. This is the north of Colombia on the border with Venezuela. This is the Caribbean Sea. So the mine is huge. This line here is actually a dedicated railway line, 150 kilometers long. And this is a dedicated port, Puerto Bolívar. And so what you can see is this is an entirely enclave. All the production goes for export. Okay, so it's an enclave production complex. This is a picture of the mine. You can see how massive it is. The ownership structure was originally set up by the state and Exxon, but since 2002, there's been 3 multinational corporations, widely known super majors, they're called, big mining corporations, 3 of the biggest 5 mining corporations in the world, in fact. And they own the mining companies in Colombia, and they also have a marketing arm in Ireland. And what's striking also, and why people like myself are involved, is how much this is centered in terms of headquarters, in terms of finance, is centered in London, in the UK. The mine was built around ejecting communities. In 2001, this was a very violent conflict with an African descendant community before the current owners took over, so they don't take responsibility for this conflict. And they've tried to say that they're working within World Bank guidance as to proper way of resettling communities, and this is evidence of that from the mine. And this is the results, which are quite modern, urbanized settlements. All the communities who are being resettled are rural communities, and so they have big problems shifting by force majeure from one type of living to another type of living. And sometimes they resist in different ways. And this is the famously called anti-mutiny police in Colombia, who attacked just 2 or 3 years ago, to 2016, 𝐒𝐥𝐸, which is another African descendant community, to force them out of their old location. So there's been a complaint to the OECD about this treatment. There's been 25 communities have been displaced. Not only that, there's been a huge impact on the environment in which these communities traditionally lived, which is destroying their sort of habitat, basically. Okay, so now I want to shift the focus slightly and just look at how much money the mine's been making. This is the average price of world coal in export markets. I say world coal, I should correct that. This is in the Atlantic basin, because there are basically two price structures in terms of export markets for coal. There's the Atlantic and the Pacific. And this is the Atlantic price of coal, basically. And you can see it peaked in around about 2011, 2012. This is the production of the mine. It is a less sharp pattern, but you can see it steadily increased until about 2015, since when it's been decreasing. And you're talking about these figures are 30 million tons per year. Okay, so it peaked at about 34 million tons of coal per year. This here shows us how much revenue the mine has made and how much profit it's made. And you can see the very close matching between these two, of course. And what you can see is the profit in the last year. This is actually 2019. I need some help in my indices, but this is 2019, okay? And you can see it's fallen into loss, actually. But if you look at the peak profit period, this mine was making over $1,000 million for its owners a year. These are quite fantastical profits. This is over $1 billion per year profits. The Colombian government, which is actually series 1 on this graph, not well explained, but the Colombian government has been taking about 1/3 of the operating profits of the mine. The reason for the drop in profits and the drop in demand has a lot to do with the effect of campaigning environmentalism. So the burning of coal in Europe has collapsed in the last 2 or 3 years. Again, I apologize for these indices. This is actually 2019. And what you can see is that the collapse in the demand for coal from this huge coal mine in the EU, I should say, more specifically in the EU 28. So what's happened is the rest of the world demand has more or less stayed the same, but the demand for coal in European electricity generation has basically plummeted. And that's almost entirely due to the effects of shift in government policy due to environmental concerns. So summarizing the sort of financial data, the mine has actually made about $8 billion for its owners and about $4 billion for the government of Colombia, but it's now gone into loss. The reason behind this, we can see these very high profits. This is from Wood Mackenzie. They're sort of a consultancy on world energy supplies. And this is known as the supply cost curve. And what you can see is Colombian coal here, which is in the sort of turquoise color, is the cheapest in the world compared to other sources, at least within the scope of their survey. And so if the price of coal, say, is at $80 a ton, which it has been for quite long periods, then these producers here are not only making a normal profit, actually, this is supply cost curves include a normal financial profit. You can see they'll be making an extra profit, surplus profit on top of that. They're very rich coal deposits, so that's number one. This corresponds to what Marx called differential rent or natural fertility. And there's also been a huge investment in the infrastructure, the railway and the port and so on. This is, again, what Marx would term differential rent too. So the mining corporation controls internal costs, and it does everything it can to avoid and minimize external costs, which are to do with keeping the environment clean and so on. The forms of solidarity which we've been engaged in are listed here. I'm not actually going to focus on these. I'm happy to discuss them. My main concern with this actual paper is that it's known just how much money the mine has made. I mean, most of the people moved are extremely unhappy with the last 20 years, last generation of dispossession of their traditional communities. It's not only their dispossession, it's the destruction of the environment. This animal here, dead, as you can see, is known as a tigrillo, which is like a little tiger. It's typically lack of waters meant that this little fellow's died. There's huge air pollution, there's huge water pollution. I don't go into this here, but the effects on a large proportion of the affected communities are not only African descendant, they're also indigenous, and there's huge effects of air and water pollution in terms of infant mortalities, in terms of problems in pregnancies and so on, huge effects on the communities. The other big effect of this mine is global. Hello. I don't know how much time I got, about maybe 1 or 2 minutes, right? The huge effects are not only very intense locally, by its very nature, the coal has a high calorific value. That's what it's being bought for. But of course, all that means is that it emits a lot of carbon dioxide. The ratio is about 2 to 1, but it depends on various factors. But you can roughly say that for every ton of coal burnt, there'll be 2 tons of carbon dioxide emitted. And the scale of this is just enormous. So for example, the amount of carbon dioxide which when this coal is burnt in Europe is about 1/6 of all the carbon emissions in the UK. So it's about 1/6 of our entire country's emissions are equivalent of the emissions from this mine. And this is a feature of what I would call sort of, yeah, it's a sort of an imperial relationship really, because you don't see the emissions here in the UK, but they actually come from this highly profitable enterprise overseas. Because of the fall in demand, there has been a profit crisis, and that's led to the company making a double offensive in terms of reducing its internal costs. There's been a major change in the shift regime, which has meant it's got 25% less workers, but the workers who remain have to work 25% longer. And the trade union in concern, Sintra Carbon, has called this the shift pattern of death. And this really is one of the characteristics of super exploitation is actually exhaustion of the workforce and premature death as a result. These workers work in highly contaminated conditions. And so these are very predictable consequences of the intensification of their workload. The other big consequence is that the mine is trying to push into new areas of excavation. But to do that, it has to destroy the existing water system. At every stage it's been doing that. And the latest point of conflict is this creek or small river called the Arroyo Bruno. And the local communities are fighting tooth and nail, including taking legal measures to try and prevent the mine's expansion. And the current owners want to ensure the mine's expansion is allowed by the government so that they've got a profitable asset in which they can sell on to a future buyer. So what we have is a possibility of a Turkish company buying the mine, but it will be at much lower standards. The standards are low enough already, but they'll become even lower in terms of environmental protections and labor standards and so on. And there is a conflict which needs further quite an escalation even of solidarity, because the communities actually want to see the mine closed. They don't want the mine to go ahead, but they don't want just the companies to close the mine and go. They want some recognition of their deep debts and their responsibility for a proper closure plan. So they're putting together a people's closure plan, which would be accountable and democratically constructed and so on. But of course, this does bring us to the problem of the relationship between the communities and the Colombian state. And it's, you know, it's highly, on past experience, it's highly unlikely that the Colombian state will back the communities, or rather back a sale of the mine onto another buyer and continue the extraction. I'm not sure about time. I think I'm just in time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andy Hugginbottom. You are rightly say about how many company that community, 25 community have involved, and they have a different aspect and different type of the government role that is coming to there. We'll have a discussion later on. So I request Swati Rajput to go give introduction of the another panelist. Swati Rajput. Hello.
Dr. Swati, are you there? Dr. Neha? Dr. Neha, Dr. Swati, please call upon our...
By giving introduction.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir.
Dr. Neha.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Yes.
I would like to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Mayank, sir. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Law, Sikkim University. He has done his MPhil from JNU, and his areas of specialization includes international trade and business law, international law, and international economic law. He has written numerous peer-reviewed journals and books, and we are honored to have listened to you, sir. So, thank you, sir. Please, over to you, sir.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Veer. Welcome you in this session.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, can you give me 5 minutes? Actually, my net is a bit slow right now, so I'm just trying to reboot the whole thing. I just need 5 minutes. 5 minutes more, please.
Fine. Till then, we will request Professor Andy that he will give more insight about the globalization and regional solidarity. Sir, if you have something more to talk about this aspect, so please tell us. It was really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe if there are any questions, we couldn't start them.
If any question is here from participants, please ask. Any query, any observation, any question? So, sir, how this labor and mining laborers, how they integrated for this thing? And I think you talk about that they handle this profit crisis. We also do have labor movement in India, and so many times they actually successfully did that thing. So do you see any, if you heard about any these South Asian movement or like that, if there is any, you can see some kind of a similarity between these countries movement or South versus North?
I don't know, but I would be very interested to learn. What I can say about the labour side, the trade union Sintra Carbon is more social movement inclined than some trade unions are. So, for example, they've generally supported the communities or tried to give them support in their struggles. I would say until very recently, the main resistance to the mining company has come from the communities, because their quality of life is incredibly deteriorated because of the mine. I mean, they are involved in quite sharp confrontations with the mine. And the workers' position has not always been exactly the same as the communities, because communities have pretty consistently said they want the mine to close. Whereas, of course, the workers, once they're in a job, I mean, they want improved conditions and they want less pollution and so on, but generally speaking, want to keep their jobs. So, you know, as a solidarity group, we work with both sections. But in the latest phase, I would say there has been a lot more pressure on the workforce, and their conditions are sharply deteriorating now. The workforce itself is not one homogeneous block. You have really two tiers. So you have workers that work at the mine, about 5,000 or 6,000 of them who've got a proper labour contract. But then you have another layer, and indeed further layers, but workers, there's at least as many workers again who are working in all the ancillary functions, the cleaners, the cooks, the people looking after the buildings and so on and so forth, who are subcontracted. They actually work in the mining complex, but they're subcontracted. They've got informal conditions, which are generally worse. And then you have probably a third layer, which is sort of suppliers to the mine, bus drivers and what have you, and they have even worse conditions. So although it's a bit, I mean, this is a debate in the literature, the workers who got permanent contracts work hard for their money, but they are better paid, generally speaking, and more secure conditions. So they're not always the most, I mean, they have a socially committed position, but not always the sharpest point of conflict until recently.
Yes, sir. It's actually similar situation is in South Asian countries, or in fact in India too. The labor condition is very bad. In fact, in mining, and they really face these problems. Not only the economic crisis, but also these health issues are so much there. And but there is no this kind of movement happen for the mining area, where they actually the tribals, or of course movement are there to oppose the mining, opening the mining in the forest area like that, but not for the cause of their wages, or their improvement in the health status, or their this kind of thing never happen actually. So they actually, there are movement, lots of tribal movements are there, and they oppose the mining in the forest area because of the environmental issues or because of their livelihood. But they never raise these concerns that their wages should increase, or their health status, or their economic status, or their life of standard should be raised. So they are remaining these situation here also. So I think this solidarity approach, where they are applying in these countries, where the successfully they are uh, can kind of raise their voice with this approach, through this approach. So it can tackle the situation, and maybe the standard of living and the economic condition can be improved in these countries too.
Yeah, in fact, you know, in one of the slides, Professor Andy, you were mentioning about eco-sites. So that's a wonderfully, you have, elaborated onto that.
Sorry, I didn't hear you properly. I'm really sorry. The line's not brilliant. Yeah, the question of ecocide is the book by David White. It's very interesting. I do recommend it as a read. His discipline is actually he's a critical criminologist, and he's part of a field which I also did my doctorate in, which is known as critical criminology against corporate crimes of the powerful. And what he basically says, his book's subtitle is actually more important than its title. Its subtitle is "Kill the Corporation Before It Kills Us." and he's actually the subtitle is more important because he doesn't really strongly argue for ecocide being made a law. He agrees with the lobbying, but his argument is actually that just getting it in law won't change very much, and what is needed is a more direct and purposeful political and social mobilization directly against the corporations, and so it's a slightly less legal and more social, if you like, approach that he's advocating. And I mean, he's basically arguing, I mean, using a sort of a crime type analogy. So basically the punishment, what is the punishment of a corporation for the damage that it's caused? Well, basically they're repeat offenders, and the corporation as a structure should be dismantled. I mean, he's projecting a transformative idea of actually dismantling corporate power.
Okay, I know that there could be many more questions, but we have to see and hear the panelists. If somebody is ready, Aprita, Day, or Mayank, Swati.
Sir, actually, one thing I just wanted to state. Actually, state always work against the cooperation of the labor. So it's always happened. They wanted to break down these kind of cooperation and movements, and they always work like the solidarity of these people so that they can run their own organizations and systems and networks. So it always happen in all the countries.
Ma'am, I have something to say. Well,
okay, you are the working on this labor aspect.
Yes. So in context of Indian scenario, most of the big corporations, most of the mining companies, many of them, they own shares in the big media houses in Indian media industry. And if they do not own a shareholding, then in other case they are the kind of biggest advertisers. So they give advertisement, and they somehow try to stop the voices to reach out to the national media, and through the national media to the masses. So I think that there is a kind of big nexus, and after the liberalization, we are witnessing a kind of tighter grip of big corporations over the democratic structure of the country. And in many cases we have seen that the penalty that was levied to some particular company, some a big corporation, by the Ministry of Environment and Forest or the respective agencies, and it was somehow waived off. So due to that corporate influence, so we are witnessing all this, and I think it is happening all over the all over the globe. But because these things have shifted mostly to the south on the globe, so it is mostly visible in developing countries, or the less developed countries, and somehow it is coming as a big challenge to the environment and to the democratic structure. So that is what I observed in Indian scenario. Labor worker, some Natasha Narwal, it's a name. So she was detained for more than a month by Indian this police, and one more person was there. I cannot recall his name. So after legal battle of months, they were released from the police custody, and
during the panel discussion
there were signs of police torture to these labor activists. So there are things happening, but somehow they are not reaching to us. There are voices of resistance, but they do not have a bigger platform or a higher platform to spread their ideas or their fights to the common people. So that is my observation in Indian scenario.
Okay. Okay, question and answer will be at the end. Let us continue our panel discussion. Panelists are waiting.
Yes,
Swati?
Yes, sir.
Sure,
We
sir.
have Dr. Veer Mayank.
Okay.
Is
Is
he
he
there?
ready?
Dr. Mayank, are you ready?
Yes, Dr. Mayank is ready.
So I'll just briefly introduce Dr. Mayank to the audience that Dr. Veer Mayank is an assistant professor in Department of Law, Sikkim University, and he has done his MPhil in international law from JNU and LLB, LLM from Purvanchal University, Jaunpur. His areas of specialization include international trade and business law, international economic law, etc. He has many publications to his credit in many national and international journals. Today, he will be speaking on global health
Hello, ma'am. Am I
security
audible?
and regional
Yes.
solidarity on health governance, complementary or antonymous, visualizing their interplay in the context of the pandemic. So I welcome Dr. Veer Mayank and we'll be glad to hear him now. Dr. Veer Mayank.
Hello?
Dr. Veer, you are not audible. Please connect yourself. He has some network issue. Dr. Veer.
No, you can ask the question, but
Okay.
as soon as somebody is ready, then we'll stop the question and answer. Okay?
Yes,
Then
sir.
it will
Then we
continue.
will resume the session. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Professor Andy, I would like to ask that can you give some insights on the role of trade unions on promoting social solidarity for laborers? So, am I audible, sir?
You are
Rashmi
audible.
ma'am, you are audible.
You are audible. It's just I have to be clear. The last point you said, social solidarity for.
Role of, basically what I'm asking is that what are the roles of trade unions on promoting social solidarity with respect to labor worldwide? We can have contrast of like developed world and developing world.
Sure. I mean, my view of the trade union movement in Europe and in my country is quite critical because, I mean, I've been heavily involved in trying to get solidarity for social movements in Colombia since about 2000. And in about 2002, 2003, I accompanied the oil workers from Colombia trade union to the TUC, the Center of Trade Unions here in the UK. And the oil workers in Colombia were attacking BP, the multinational. BP has got an appalling human rights record in Colombia. It's since left the country, but indirectly it's responsible for a lot of killing of people through proxy paramilitary forces. And so the oil worker was trying to explain this, and the TUC here just wouldn't believe him. In fact, they started a counter campaign to our efforts to get solidarity in the trade union movement with the oil workers of Colombia. And they destabilized our campaign, actually. It wasn't only BP, but also Coca-Cola. The trade union of Coca-Cola workers in Colombia had 9 assassinations. Coca-Cola was pretty much directly, there was a pattern of assassinations. Whenever there was a bargaining for a collective agreement, then paramilitaries would come in and kill the trade union negotiators. So it was very strong circumstantial evidence that Coca-Cola benefited from these assassinations. So we started a boycott of Coca-Cola, and the TUC in the UK mounted a campaign against our campaign. They tried to do everything they could to stop the boycott of Coca-Cola because they said workers' jobs in the UK were more important. So, I mean, there's this, I think that the concept of labor aristocracy has got some validity still in the richer countries of the world. So the trade unions, international sectors, there is an international sector of mine workers, oil workers, and so on, do give some support. I don't want to be completely negative. I think that they do give some support from trade union activists in the global south. But the real crunch, in my country anyway, we are a center of extractivist multinational corporations. So the real crunch is, what are you going to do about these corporations? And I'm afraid I regret this, because I'd rather it was different. It would make our job a lot easier. But that historically, the official trade union movement has actually sided and defended the corporations and tried to do everything it can to stop really hitting those corporations hard. And that's a great shame. But so there is a structural problem with solidarity if you only look at the trade union movement, whereas we've had more support from people environmentally concerned, and if you like, socially concerned about human rights in a more general way. I mean, that's a slightly negative balance sheet, but it's certainly based on a lot of experience, I can tell you that, of trying.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, we also have questions from other participants. I would like Fidel Hemati to give her question, address her question to Professor Andy.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yeah, please carry on.
Thanks, Professor Andy, for a wonderful speech. My question is regarding the theory of Emanuel Wallerstein. He wrote in his Geopolitics and Geoculture books, and he divided the world capitalism system into 3 phases. For example, core or center countries, which is first world country, semi-periphery, and periphery countries. The labor and the resources taken from this periphery countries process in the semi-periphery, and the advantage and benefit goes to the first world country. What is my question? After pandemic, rising China, rising India, any other countries in a decentralized world, even this theory is applicable right now, and how it is applicable? And that's my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I thank your parents for giving you that name, by the way. The issue is Colombia fits into a category of country where it does directly apply. The London Economist talked about countries, they call them civets. Okay, so countries like Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, to some extent South Africa still, right, are pretty much still in what you could call a neo-colonial type relationship with big extractivist corporations. I do think China certainly, and I actually leave it to your collective wisdom much more than mine, India probably, don't really fit into that category in the same way. But I mean, everybody's looking very seriously about what's going on in China and trying to work out how we sort of theoretically understand this. And this is certainly happening in all the circles I'm involved with. And it's certainly happening in terms of sort of the US antagonism to China. So the US-China rivalry is a major sort of dynamic of politics of the 21st century. It's probably the framing dynamic of everything else in a way. And so my take on this is threefold. Okay, first is I like the analysis of labor super exploitation. I think it applies to China. If you look at Apple and the big US corporations who've located their manufacturing capacity out of the imperial centers into China and elsewhere now, then they clearly they make massive profits out of cheap labor manufacturing. So there has been a huge shift in the world system in the last 30 years, where I mean traditionally it was manufacturing was in the global north, raw materials coming from the global south. That's changed in my lifetime, certainly. So I mean China, there's more manufacturing workers in China than in the rest of the world put together. And so China has turned back to servicing the capitalist world, capitalist economy. And we all know that this is a major, major change. The second point, so the first point is labor super exploitation is real. The second point is an issue raised by Sean Stars, whose work I do find interesting, right? Which is he points out who makes the profits from the huge manufacturing industries in China is not only Chinese corporations. And he points out the extent to which US and European corporations are actually the ones who make the profit. So Apple being the paradigm example. Then you have the whole, thirdly, you have the whole question of US aggression against China, which is very real. I don't agree with a lot that's happening in China, but what I do say is that the build-up of pressure against them is coming from the US. I mean, it's coming that way around. The US always wants to have a military advantage to secure its economic advantage. And there are many countries that have been victims of this. I think the terrible genocide of the Tamils in Sri Lanka is partly a victim of this militarization of conflict in the Indian Ocean region. And I mean, I don't know where it's going to end, right? I mean, the British UK government's just conducted a review, integrated security foreign relations review, and it's following the tilt to the Indo-Pacific region of US foreign policy. So what the UK government is now saying post-Brexit is that it's going to have a tilt towards the Indo-Pacific region as well. So I think that strategically, and I do see it this way around, I mean, I can't explain it from your experience and you have better analysis than I will, but from my side of the relationship, I think the US and UK are very interested in recruiting India into an anti-China alliance, and they'd rather have India as an ally. And I think so, although India's got its own capacity, its own certainly regional power, it's also a question of then how does India fit with this sort of global game that's going on in terms of control of the Indo-Pacific region. It's not a full answer to your question. I mean, I think that the BRICS phenomenon is real. I think that China is becoming in itself almost like another imperial power in many ways, which I don't welcome. But I don't think it's the, what's the word? I think that the peaceful rise of China was a genuinely legitimate concern. But I think that the US is now going to try to make sure that China does not rise very much more, especially in the high-tech sectors. So, you know, these are really sort of big politics we're talking here, and none of us know how it's going to play out, but we can analyze the trends, and the trends are towards, you know, quite significant problems down the road.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any one question or somebody, panelist ready? Swati?
Yeah, sir.
Anybody is ready?
Dr. Veer?
I think Professor Bhattacharya have a question.
No, then if other panelists are not there, then question and answer will be continued.
No other questions.
Sir, this,
My
section is next, but the next session,
hello.
I can present it now.
Veer, Mayank, ready? Veer?
Sir, this is Dr. Mayank. Yes, sir, I am ready. Am I audible, sir?
Good afternoon. Veer, we are giving 20 minutes for interaction. Hello, Veer?
Okay.
Veer, we are giving 20 minutes to have a interactions with the delegates and present the thought. Please go ahead.
Okay, sir.
If it is PPT, share your PPT.
Yes, sir, I'm trying to share. Please enable the link.
I think technical team needs to make Dr. Veer co-host.
Yeah, he's now co-host.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes.
Is my presentation visible?
Visible. Go ahead.
Hello. Okay, thank you, sir. My presentation is on the topic global health security and regional solidarity in health governance, complementary or antonyms, visualizing their interplay in the context of the pandemic. My idea in this paper is basically how global health security and regional health security are playing out in the global arena. Basically, what we have seen in this pandemic and earlier also during the Ebola crisis is that the way the global health security is structured at the international level is the entire health security paradigm moves in a that it becomes largely focused on protecting the high income against the public health threats coming from low and middle income countries. And the second objective of this global health security paradigm that we have got is that the disease the disease containment is emphasized rather than the emphasis being on the prevention of the disease outbreaks. So what we have seen out here is that the moment a pandemic or a contagious disease breaks out in one country, like earlier would have seen Ebola in plague in Gujarat or Ebola in the African countries, the immediate or a reflex reaction is that countries stop movement of flights in that particular country or from that particular country. So in this context is my presentation is structured. Now, I'll start with a small little history of the global public health security. This health security has been in existence since the 14th century. That was basically the start at when we started thinking about the global public health security paradigm. Means we started thinking because at that point of time we can really relate to when international trade started picking up. Not in the sense that we have seen during the colonial period, but that was kind of a start, and better ships came into existence, harder and sturdier ships that they were able to travel long distance over the high seas. And while taking away goods from one country to another, they also took away the pathogens that were confined to those countries. Now, geographically, the pathogens that a tropical country harbors is quite different from the pathogens that a cold countries like countries in Europe will harbor. And it might be difficult. It would be difficult for these pathogens to survive in different circumstances or different countries. So species become exotic once they move out from their place of origin. So now, once the ships started moving, these pathogens came into existence. Means these pathogens also started traveling from those countries, and the countries started imposing a kind of restriction at the port, which was known as quarantine, a 14-day period, and that was largely for the purpose of protecting the domestic population in that country. Now, the second thing that also came up was that at that point of time, science was not that very developed. So it was not really known that the pathogens were causing the disease and what kind of pathogens were causing the disease. So when cholera started spreading in Europe, it was presumed, or it was kind of hypothesized that the disease is caused by dirty or infected water rather than from the people, because what used to happen was that when the ships used to come to the ports, merchants, like as in today also, they prevented the imposition of quarantine because that affected their profits. So both the things were going together, means the countries wanted to impose quarantine so that they can eliminate the domestic risk that would be arising from the pathogens. And on the other hand, the merchants and traders never wanted those quarantine conditions because that affected their profits very badly. Anyway, so later on, but still the safeguard was that these ships necessarily took a lot of time traveling from one country to another, and during the process, during this travel period, it became evident if there was some disease on board or not. Later on, with the development of speed, with the development of new technology, and with the increase in speed of the ships, this period, the buffer period that they used to have between the sailing of ship from one country to another, got reduced drastically, and that led to the transmission of diseases from one country to another. We can see basically it's a 12-hour gap between one or two countries, means the diseases spread pretty fast now these days on the back of air travel. So that's how the globalization has started impacting the transmission of disease, and the entire nature of global public health security has undergone this change. Now, the global health security, it was means with the start of with the development of new technology, global health security also started moved from a regional to a global approach. It started manifesting itself at a global level, and primarily it manifested, or it crystallized itself after the First World War. During the period of 1851 and 1900, sanitary conferences were held in Europe. Several sanitary conferences, close to around 10, were held in Europe, and Office International de Hygiene Public, OIHP, was established in Europe. Now, Europe took the lead in this disease prevention, because primarily that was the European century, and primarily the trade took place between countries in Europe and their colonies in other parts of the world. But of course, Europe was not alone. In America, there was a Pan-American Sanitary Bureau was established by these American states, couple of American states. However, what's important out here is that these countries, these regions, Europe and America, they had their independent organizations for managing the health issues, and their primary focus was that the diseases may not be imported from other parts of the world to their country. So the regional approach that we are talking about today was very much evident from the very beginning, from before the start of the World War I, and this approach was there since the very beginning, since the start, when the countries started realizing that they have to protect their domestic population from import of the diseases from other parts of the world. Now, after the First World War, the League of Nations Health Organization came into existence. However, what's important out here is that the League of Nations Health Organization, while it did came into existence, it didn't dissolve the OIHP or the Pan-American Sanitary Bureau. They continue to exist in one form or the other. So at one point of time, three organizations were existing: the League of Nations Health Organization, OIHP, and the Pan-American Sanitary Bureau. Now, of course, if you have got three organizations, they are destined to fail. So, basically the politics between the European countries and the Americans were playing out. So the League of Nations Health Organization was not successful. The three organizations were pulling in different directions, and it was destined to fail. So it did fail. After the Second World War, the countries also realized that they cannot carry on the way they were carrying on, and WHO, that's the World Health Organization, came into existence. Once the World Health Organization came into existence, all these three organizations were subsumed under the World Health Organization, and only a single organization at a global level was left. So the position was that now the health security of the world was in the hands of one organization, which was the World Health Organization. of course, as with the other specialized bodies of the United Nations, WHO was held hostage to the Cold War politics, as well as the neoliberal agenda and the new international economic order. Neoliberal agenda followed the new international economic order. The World Health Organization particularly faced these the play of these new international economic order and the neoliberal agenda of global TNCs in its full might, so as to say. What the problem that WHO had been facing is that the lack of funding, the lack of the funding of WHO is determined on the members' contributions, and these members too do not pay the full amount, the amount that they owe to the WHO in full. So eventually what happens is that the WHO has come to depend upon the private organizations like the Gavi Alliance or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to secure funding for the activities of the WHO. That's part number one. The second part is that the transnational corporations or the pharmaceutical companies that are funding the WHO, the funding that WHO receives on behalf of these organizations, it's for a very specific, or it's for the target, it's targeting one disease rather than for, say, social medicine or primary health centers to be established in developing countries. Now it becomes a very disease specific, it becomes quite a very disease specific intervention on the part of the WHO. So in developing countries or underdeveloped countries, the strategy has not worked out. In some cases, like in the elimination of smallpox, the strategy does work out, that it was a complete disease focus, but the strategy has not really worked out in other disease areas, because health is not something which is disease specific. It's an absence of disease, and therefore the intervention is not at the level of a disease. The intervention is at the level of existence of a person in a society and his living conditions in that particular area. So what we can see at the WHO is the coalition of two ideologies, one promoting the specific disease focus, a vertical intervention, and the other promoting a horizontal intervention that is at a social medical level, and that health should be taken in a holistic fashion, and it should be dealt in that fashion. Now, this is the problem on which my paper is based, and I had pointed it out earlier, that global health security in current use is largely focused on protecting high-income countries against public health threats coming from low and middle-income countries. Flahalt et al. 2016. From the same paper, the second point is also there. Global health security emphasizes disease containment to protect national security rather than prevention of disease outbreak. So this essentially is a neoliberal agenda. First of all, that you have to have a disease focus, and you seek to contain the disease in that particular country rather than preventing disease outbreak. Now, if the focus is more upon developed countries, if the rich and developed countries, that diseases do not travel from the low and middle income countries, naturally what happens is that the low and the middle income countries will have to think about themselves, because the structure of the WHO or the structure of the global health security is not attuned to the problems of developing countries, or not focused towards the problems of these developing countries. How does the WHO comes to take a look at it? I'm discussing 2 points in this paper. One is the WHO in the global regional context. that is how WHO works and how it takes care of the regional, how it takes care of the problems that are there in a particular region. And the second, what the countries are doing on their own, so to say, bypassing the WHO and creating their own independent way of looking into the specific needs of that particular region. Now, as far as the first part is concerned, the WHO, the executive body or the determining body of the WHO is the World Health Assembly, and it's the governing body of the WHO and is composed of delegates from the member countries. The second is, which is important for my presentation, is the regional organization. These regional organizations, they are a part of the WHO, and they function within the overall framework of the WHO for meeting the specific needs of an area. The purpose of these regional organizations is to look after the specific needs of the region. So we have got 6 regional organizations, and they are distributed geographically. Now, the function of the regional organization, Article 46 of the Constitution of the WHO provides each regional organization shall consist of a regional committee and a regional office. Article 47 of the same Constitution provides that the representative of the member states and it shall consist of the representatives of the member states and the associate members in the region concerned. The chief functions of the regional organization, Article 50 of the Constitution of the WHO provides the functions of the regional organization, chief among them, basically A and C under Article 50, Clause A and Subclause C, to formulate policies governing matters of an exclusively regional character. And Subclause C says to suggest to the regional office the calling of technical conferences and such additional work or investigation in health matters as in the opinion of the regional committee would promote the objective of the organization within the region. The position of regional organization is that they are not independent of the global organization that is based in Geneva. They have to work in tandem with the global organization, which approach also, but what affects is that the policies means formulating a one-size-fits approach for the entire world is not really a very effective way in handling the health security problems of the world, which my paper tries to point out that since the approach of World Health Organization is to contain the diseases within the countries rather than preventing their outbreak. So basically, if you're not trying to prevent the outbreak, then you are isolating the regions, or you are making the regions as separate from each other, and you are trying to prevent the movement of the pathogens, which has been the what to say, the idea that has been prevalent because of this, the quarantine structure that we have, that we should prevent the movement of pathogens from one country to another rather than treating the disease at its very base. So the countries are still following the idea that the 19th century idea that quarantine is the most effective policy for health security, for global health security, or for health security of any region. Now, the second thing is that since regions would be having different kind of health problems, so regions have to be independent, of course governed by the international organization, but nonetheless regions have to be independent, and they will have to take their decisions separately and for that particular purpose. Say, taking an example like obesity. obesity is quite prevalent in United States of America, or say the developed countries, but it's not that prevalent. It's of course getting prevalent in India also, but it's not that prevalent. We are still facing the problem of tuberculosis and malaria. So the regional organization that is focusing in this particular area should have an exclusive focus on tuberculosis or malaria or malnutrition rather than obesity. But if you look at the WHO website, the kind of focus that this lifestyle diseases are getting is something that, to say, it's not really that much. We should not be that much concerned about these lifestyle diseases. Means, of course, we should be. A whole lot of people are affected, but as a percentage of population, it's not that huge. So that is the problem that we face with a global organization and a regional organization. Now, that was the first part of the paper that I was trying to come up with. And the second part is that the alternative method that has been adopted by our countries, by basically India is taking a lead in that, not being dependent upon the WHO and the transnational corporations, but taking an alternative approach and trying to work out a different method of tackling or facing the challenges that are there at this regional level. So the Honorable Prime Minister has given this call for regional solidarity. Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji has given this call for regional solidarity. What his exact words were that if the 21st century is to be the Asian century, it cannot be without greater integration among the countries of South Asia and the Indian Ocean Island countries. The spirit of regional solidarity that you have shown during the pandemic has proven that such integration is possible. So the Honorable Prime Minister is emphasizing on the regional solidarity in the Indian Ocean countries. And the reason evidently is that our problems in the region haven't got the focus that they should have, and we have to find a different method or a different way to approach or solve those problems rather than following the WHO methods. For this regional solidarity, the Honorable Prime Minister gave a 5-point program. It's basically at a suggestion stage at this moment. It means it was in February 2021, but nonetheless, this is what he has said. A special visa scheme for doctors and nurses so that they can travel quickly within our region during the health emergencies on the request of the receiving countries. Second is the regional air ambulance. Third, regional platform collating, compiling, and studying data about the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines on the population. Regional network for promoting technology-assisted epidemiology for preventing future pandemics, and sharing successful public health policies and schemes. Next is the regional solidarity in vaccine distribution. This again shows that the way the parallel initiative has been taken for the purpose of meeting the needs of the region. India has gifted over 55 lakh doses of COVID vaccines to neighboring countries, of which 5 lakh vaccines went to Sri Lanka and 1 lakh to Bahrain. Bhutan, 1.5 lakh. Nepal and Bangladesh were given 10 and 20 lakh respectively. Myanmar received 15 lakh, Mauritius 1 lakh, and Seychelles got 50,000 doses. So basically, the country has taken a lead in promoting regional solidarity. That's one. And the second part, which is the more important part, is that while we are going to work with the WHO and the regional organizations, but we are following a separate track to ensure that the diseases and the pandemics can be contained in the region, and we are not that much dependent upon the global organizations. Now, this is the concluding part of my my presentation, and which is providing regional focus to health security needs. Now, technological solutions are important, but regional focus is required for solving the health problems in developing countries. This is what the idea of my paper is. Community-based health services at the primary health centers are important for developing countries. So instead of a disease-based focus, we have to develop the primary health centers or the community-based health services. The population right now, in our case, is poor, and they cannot be treated in this neoliberal agenda or the paradigm that the patients have to be treated as clients rather than individuals, and they need to pay for all the services. Once we adopt this kind of an approach, the neoliberal approach, we do not try to intervene at a community health level. We try to intervene at an individual level. And in developing countries where there is poverty, we cannot really isolate the individual from the social conditions of the society in which he or she is there. We have to address the society. We have to address poverty. We have to address lack of access to toilets. We have to address lack of access to drinkable or potable water. So a community-based health services are more important. One size fits all approach cannot be adopted. Regional organizations have to play a greater role to solve the regional problems, as they are different for each region. Health security should be in the hands of regional organization and supported by the global organization. Right now, it's in a different fashion. It's in the hands of the organization, and regional organizations are merely giving suggestions to the global organization. They are not independent to carry out the services or to carry out the actions that they think that's desirable in a particular region. They are overall controlled by the global organization, necessarily so because eventually they are funded by the global organization. To whomsoever the global organization is beholden for that money, they would necessarily be following the dictates of that particular sponsor or that particular provider. So some pattern has to be adopted where regional organizations become independent and they get their funding separately. They merely report to the global organization, but they have to carry out their activities independently of the global organization. That's one. And second, of course, in parallel, the regional solidarity paradigm that has been adopted by Shri Narendra Modi ji should be picked up with gusto, so that besides the regional solidarity, we can also promote India at the world stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayank. You have to touch upon the various issues regarding the global health and solidarity. Particular health issues very important. They have many aspects and many facets which we have to look into details. I request now, Swati, if his third is ready, we'll continue third panelist.
Sir, one minute.
Okay,
Actually,
ready?
no.
Let me say something. I know that many questions are there. At least three person have raised.
Sir, I request you. And I request you. You please take Professor Pyal and his observation, and then you may call for the question.
That I am going.
Okay, thank you so much.
Because co-chairperson is there, no? So,
yes.
So initially, I will ask any one or two questions are there. Then we will follow the remark and interaction.
Sure, sir. Sure,
that
sir.
is
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Kavita and Professor Vaidya.
Thank you.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Sir.
Very much audible.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And I would like to convey my heartiest gratitude to you because of arranging such a beautiful conference regarding solidarity. And since we are from geography discipline, so first of all of you know that geography is considered already a subject of synthesis, and to some extent it includes solidarity in this respect. But the question comes regarding the application of solidarity in geographical study, because you see, this is the time, you know, it is the time of power politics. All of you know that power politics. So my question is to Professor Andy, will it be possible to apply such type of approach of geographical solidarity or solidarity approach in geography in the discipline under the control of power politics that has been existing throughout the world? Is it possible, sir? What is your opinion?
So this question to whom?
It is
Mayank,
to Professor Andy.
Okay.
Do you want me to come back straight away?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a short answer. Although I'm not a geographer, so I don't know the ins and outs of your discipline. But although I started to read political geography, I have kind of like two thoughts. Okay, the first is if you look at climate change and the climate crisis, then it's very much about power politics. It's about who sets the narrative, about who controls the narrative, and it's very interesting listening to the last presentation, because I think the structure of the United Nations and how they present the narrative about climate change and in effect feed control, always the control is taken by the Western countries, right? And it's their narrative, which is the hegemonic one. And so, for example, I'm in the UK and we're going to have the COP26 in Glasgow in November, and it will be Biden and Johnson who try to set the narrative for the whole world. Their preferred solution will be what they try to make is the preferred solution for the whole world. So I think this is complete power politics. Okay, so yes. Very quickly, the other point is as a geographer, I do like the work of David Harvey. I have a criticism of him in the political economy, actually, but I think in his discipline, he's made a tremendous contribution. And so it's a slight paradox, okay, because he writes about absolute space, relative space, and relational space. And I really like the idea of relational space. I think it works very well as a geographical concept, and the way the world system presses certain spaces together and elongates other ones, and so on. So I think that is, and I don't know if that's power politics or not, right? But it's probably the intersection of political economy and geography, and how commodity chains push certain parts of the world closer and separate others. So I like that concept quite a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. And you see, all of we know that in spite of having SAARC and ASEAN, like these may be considered as regional solidarized power, and you know that in spite of existing such type of organization, in true sense, at international level, in spite of existing such type of cooperation, the South China Sea conflict is still a factor of concern. Anyhow, I think we should rethink about the approach, because you see, in many cases, just like Dr. Mayank have mentioned that in the time of COVID-19 pandemic, we have shown greater solidarity. But you see, in many cases, solidarity may raise extreme nationalism or extreme regionalization. Extreme nationalism may not be desirable in so many cases. And in micro level study, we have already found out that in the name of attaining or showing solidarity, many small agitations, agitations or different type of movements have been going on. Like you know, in the Darjeeling Hill area, there are so many political movement. So because applying of solidarity approach in geography, we should think about it. Although I know it better that it is very much, it has a good effect also. But we should think about it. Thank you very much. And I don't have any question. And I would like to request the organizer to.
So any more question? Any one or two questions from the delegate? As I have seen that no questions.
I would request Dr. Nina Joseph. She wanted to ask some question, I think.
Okay.
No, I don't have a question. I was about to say if there are no panelists, I can pitch in. That's all.
Yes, ma'am.
I think my name was called out earlier and I was a bit confused, which is my section. To my paper. So need not waste time now asking question.
Okay. Anyone else who wants?
It's the student named Pratyush Sinha, and he asked a question to Dr. Andy. He is keen to know that do you think the pandemic will change the scenario of globalization and government will realize the importance of regional solidarity more than ever? Thanks. So this is his questions. This is his question.
This is question to Mayank, maybe.
This question is to Dr. Andy. I think this question is in the chat box and visible to everyone.
Okay.
Sir.
I think Dr. Mayank can answer it more fully, but I just comment very quickly, okay? 2 or 3 things. First is there has been a breakdown of solidarity in Europe. You've probably seen it in the news, right? The European Union and the British government have been at some tension about the release of the AstraZeneca vaccine. But I mean, the bigger story is absolutely the question of when will the vaccines arrive in the global south? And I think the latest figures for Africa are they won't arrive before 2023. I mean, this is, again, another aspect which I'd be interested what Veer says about this, right? The World Health Organization has tried to have, or at least it presents itself as trying to have a program of global vaccination, but it's absolutely clear Israel is the first, and then you have countries like UK and maybe United States and so on. So this isn't, where does India fit is also part of the story, because I know you have great capacity for vaccine production. You are strong in the production of vaccine. But I mean, the inequalities of where the vaccine is going to get to are quite horrendous, I think. And then just very quickly, the other thing is the question of the debt, because again, in my country, the government's opened up a huge fiscal deficit in order to pay for continuation of social security during the lockdown and so on. But it's at very low interest rates. Whereas in the so-called emerging countries, including India, the interest rates on the debt are 4 or 5 times higher. So I saw an article in the Financial Times just last week that the Indian government is paying 25% of all revenue is going back out as debt repayment. So this must constrain what a government can do in terms of supporting society and economy during the crisis.
So Mayank, would you like to react?
Sir, can you, if I can request you, can you please repeat the question?
Okay.
Sir, this question is that do you think the pandemic will change the scenario of globalization and government will realize the importance of regional solidarity more than ever?
Actually, what I would say, or my opinion is, I mean, of course, this question is something in which you can only give an opinion looking what's going to happen in the future. Maybe an educated guess, but nonetheless, it's a guess. I don't believe that globalization is getting strengthened. Right now, we are sitting on a Zoom meeting, and I am privileged to be in touch with Professor Andy, but as you can see, means to be factual, it means to be frank, I'm actually right now today on leave, and since I am not in my what you call place of work, so my internet was not working, and I'm just moving around and holding this mobile in my hand and trying to get some internet access. So essentially what you see is, I don't really think that globalization is going to stop. But on the other hand, what I really feel is that in this large, what you call the large structure or the large context of globalization, regional problems will start getting greater focus. The more we are discussing regional problems, the better we are able to discuss regional problems, the more focus these regional problems will get. Governments have been trying for very long, means I'm looking into international economic law, and the governments do their best as far as possible. Governments are not something which is, controlled by one person. They are reflective of the opinion of different interest groups in that particular society. So whatever the interest groups means, the common factor in the interest groups, that's what the governments do. Individuals are just there reflecting the interest of the society. So the more focus the regional problems are going to get, the more focus the governments are going to give to those regional problems. As I had pointed out, our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, he gave this focus because, and as Professor Andy has pointed out, we have got a good capacity in vaccine manufacture. So the focus was brought back to the country. The focus was brought back that we have to tackle the disease ourselves. But nonetheless, it's happening within the overall context, in the overall paradigm, or in the overall structure or the context of globalization. We are sitting and discussing that. That's what my opinion is. Thank you.
So I think no question, I think now. All right, Swati?
Yes, sir.
Should I give my remark?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. Sure.
Anything left? Tell me. Okay.
There seems, Dr. Swati, one question from, somebody, Professor Bhagat has written that he want to ask.
Okay.
Okay.
We would request sir to please ask his question.
Very question.
Is sir there?
Professor Bhagat, are you there in the meeting?
Hello?
Yeah, he is there.
Yes, ask questions, please.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. Professor Bhagat, are you there?
I think, ma'am, sir's mic is off.
Sir, please unmute yourself. Shall I write to him? Just a minute. Professor Bhagat.
I think it will be better if a call is made to you, him.
It is better.
Sir, please. I don't know. He is able to.
He is not connecting.
Not connected.
So what to do?
Just a minute, sir. I'm just calling him.
He raised the question, what happened now and what side of the government will take, what is the role of the government, and how the different organizations, particularly coal mines, how they are managed, what are the difficulties, how different companies, how the community that who are working in the field and unrest among them, that he has narrated very nicely. He has given the example of Europe, then South America and Africa, and which was very real thing that happened. Of course, it is to some extent it related with India. It is some similarity with Indian coal mines. But at the same time, he told that there is a necessity by the government to take initiative to meet the problems which are confronting by the coal mine people. Whereas Mayank has rightly touched upon the health issue in terms of globalization. When you think about the health issue, so different. He started with the Gujarat plague because it was very much spread and it was very much affected by many people. During the pandemics, we are very much familiar one word, that is quarantines. So these people were quarantined, this region, this was affected. So he has given the things very very interesting. But he also organized. He said that three organizations are very work differently. You are right, sir. Whatever the work, even during the pandemics, different organizations working differently, and they are not coming together. So approaches may be different, but they have to come together. Another point he has discussed lack of funding of the WHO. Really, there should be strength. There should be strength. There is necessity to strengthen the regional organization who are working in the health security, and that is why you are rightly at the last pointed out there should be community-based health services. That is very important, and that is why there is a role, because if you say the community-based health services, it means that there is a need to work by the regional organization at the most rather than the WHO. WHO will give the guideline, but at the same time, funding should be supplied to the regional organization, and regional organization naturally will provide the solution, practical things at the local level to overcome the pandemic. From this lecture, what I learned that now we are aware about the health issue. Now we are about aware about the coal mine people, what they are thinking, and we can correlate our issue, whatever our India's issue in terms of health, in terms of the coal mines peoples. So then we are getting some mind and approaches and visions how to solve it. From this point of view, these lectures were very interesting and provocating, very intelligent. I should thank you to these people, and I should thank to the three ladies. One is Kavita Arora, Poonam Sharma, and Swati Rajput, who has rightly handled the entire the work. And once people are coming together, either gents or ladies, and if they don't have a different approaches coming together, like a regional organization in a one way, in one approach with one objective and practicing in the same way, Kavita, then Poonam and Swati have worked together, and I should thank to the Bhagat Singh College for providing this platform. More than 54 people, delegates were watching this one, and among them, I should thank to our chairperson. He has some minds in his mind, some idea regarding West Bengal. We know that because of hilly region, because of the mountains part, because of geography, some aspect which we have to cover in the health issue, and that is why health geography, health security, that is very important. For this could be the questions for the near future. Many geographers, many teachers and research students will take this issue so that we'll get some benefit in the normal period, in pandemic period, and we'll be happy if the Bhagat Singh College take the initiative in this regards. And there is a lot of chances, because as a geographer, we are rooting to work on geographical aspect. But if you interrelate this issue at national and global levels, we'll get many more the facet an idea that we have to cover. It means that this topic is not covered by only geography. It's covered by many more sociologists, political science thinker, planner. So thank you for choosing the subjects, and thank you for giving the academic food to the delegates. And thank you, co-chairperson, for associate with us. We'll still continue our relations in future also. And again, thanks to the Sardana, who is the principal of the college. I know that entire college teams, very big, good team, work together, and every year they are organizing conference. Sometimes twice in a year they are organizing. This is a miracles. So let me congratulate again to the college, and particularly Poonamji, Kavitaji, and Swatiji. I salute to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vaidya, for
Session in charge.
motivating us.
Session in charge, Dr. Swati. Can I take 2 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to congratulate session in charges. They very wonderfully coordinated the session. Actually, whatever we plan, sometimes it's not actualized in that manner, whatever way we plan. So our two speakers, one got down with COVID, and he was in the morning, he informed us that he is not able to go to the even for washing the mouth and cleaning the hands. So he was very badly became ill. And another panelist got stuck in his selection committee, though she was very much planned, and she sent us the abstract, and she was very much interested in this session. So, but whatever we have very beautiful things today to discuss and deliberate and think over. One presentation was delivered by Professor Andy, and we are really thankful to you, sir. I don't know what is the time right now, and you join us from your busy schedule, and you deliver a so wonderful lecture that I just wanted to hear again. I'll run this recording, and I really wanted to hear again that this presentation was so really very good presentation was that. And also you gave the answers of those questions we generally ask in the sessions in a very beautifully and very different manner, which we cannot think. So it was little bit of beyond our thinking and our perspective. So you gave us a new perspective about these things. Mining's labor cooperation, and that movement is going on and bringing the solidarity as a tool to generate some kind of a awareness or to tackle the situation of the labor mining people. And another presentation which delivered by Dr. Mayank, I'm really thankful to you, sir. I very short notice you accepted our invitation because we were catching out some other panelists, but he also refused, and then we called Dr. Mayank, and he was accepted our invitation. And because I was knowing that he is working on globalization aspect and also the health issues, so I requested that he should talk about solidarity. There are many interesting speakers available who generally discuss the globalization, geopolitics, and security issues. But I really wanted this panel to go beyond those issues and discuss some new things and new parameters which can bring in the geographical studies and research. So I just requested Professor Andy and I requested Dr. Mayank that since this health issue is very much and people would like, we are facing since last year this pandemic, and we really wanted to hear something on global solidarity on this aspect. And Dr. Mayank very much in a very good manner delivered that how the South Asian countries are doing adopting this solidarity approach to tackle the vaccine delivery and all those things. And Dr. Andy also talked about this labor mining and that cooperation thing. So I'm really thankful, and I'm really thankful to Professor Vaidya to join us, and he comfortably, whenever we talk and whenever we call, he is always available and he always help us. Thank you for your remarks. I also thank you, Dr. Pyal, to join us. Actually, I was planning to keep you in somewhere else in the conference, but since you were gave a very late confirmation, so we requested you to join us, and your remark was really very, very worth mentioning. So thank you, sir, for joining us. And thank you all the participants for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over to session in charge.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kavita, and thanks to all for joining us. And now we are going to end this session, and we'll be meeting in the technical sessions now, which are going to help. There will be 4 parallel sessions, which will be conducted by different session in charges from 3:30 onwards. And we have already circulated the program schedule and the paper presentation schedules. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining, and all of you for listening patiently. Thank you.